Welcome into the episode of Patrick Jones Baseball. In this week's episode, we have ML Morgan on the podcast. ML is the head baseball coach at Norfolk State University. Previously, he's been a full-time scout for the Tampa Bay Rays, and then he's been a college baseball coach before that. He just took over this program. He just took over Norfolk State. This is his very first year. So I love getting coaches on the podcast. And if you're a listener, you know this too, where I don't care what the division is. I always just like getting coaches to come on who it's their first year. They're building from the ground up, and it's cool to see what their vision is, and then like the steps that they're going to take to in order to accomplish that vision, and have them share that with everybody, and then we can just follow along as they go about doing that. So ML's a great guy. He's got a phenomenal reputation in the game. So really happy to connect with him, and I think you're going to enjoy this episode with ML Morgan. All right, we now welcome onto the podcast ML Morgan. ML, thanks for coming on today.
Appreciate it, Patrick. I'm glad to be on with you.
So I got to be honest, man. When I was researching you for doing this podcast, I was creeping on you on Twitter a little bit. I was scrolling through your Twitter, and then I saw you retweet a couple of tweets, and I had to do a double check because I thought one of them was a fake account, because I had no idea that Michael Vick was the head football coach at Norfolk State. I didn't know that.
Yeah, he started last December, so that's brought a lot of publicity to the university and a lot of excitement, man. So it's been pretty cool to kind of get to know him a little bit.
No, yeah, that's incredible. But I like doing when I'm doing these podcasts, I like kind of learning more about the person themselves, right? The coach themselves, kind of the background. I think a lot of times you see some of these, and people, whether it be mechanical stuff or whatever, they want that right out of the gate. And like for me, like I think it's more interesting to hear about the person's background and like kind of who they are and how they got to be the person they are, and then also how they got to be at the place that they're at too. And so for you, like growing up, I mean, like what was ML like growing up from a baseball standpoint, and just as a kid standpoint too?
Yeah, no doubt, man. I always loved the game. My dad's a coach, so my dad coaches at Virginia State University. He's been there over 20 some years. So I've always kind of grew up around the game. So I always knew I wanted to do something with baseball. I played basketball growing up in high school as well, a little bit of football up until high school, but baseball was always my passion. Just always loved the game. Loved to watch the game. I remember watching the Braves on TBS back in the day, or the Cubs on WGN, just kind of fell in love with the game. And so that was me growing up, left-handed. So I played mostly first base growing up, and I pitched, and then I transitioned to the outfield because I can run a little bit. So transitioned to the outfield. Luckily was able to get a scholarship to go play at VCU for Coach Paul Keyes, who was a legendary coach at VCU, played there for 4 years, had a great experience. We won 2 conference championships. I was just a very average college player. I was left-handed and could run a little bit, but that was about it. So, once my college career was over, kind of went outside of baseball for a little bit, and did some stuff in athletic compliance, actually. So did some NCAA compliance work for a few years, and then, just realized I wanted to get back into the game. So at that point, went back to VCU, got my master's degree, joined on as the director of ops, and then, kind of went from there. It's kind of how my story started to, be told.
So I got a few questions from that. One, the compliance part. Anything that you learned, or like the big, like, man, I had no idea this is how it works. Like any takeaways from you doing compliance work with the NCAA? Like, I think that's interesting.
Yeah, so it's just a different perspective, right? So it just gives me a unique perspective, being on the administrative side for a couple of years. So I did that for 3 years, 1 year at the conference office with the CAA, and then 2 years actually at Old Dominion, as an assistant compliance director. Just, learning the NCAA rules in and out, and then ways to kind of, things within the rules that you could do, and ways to just kind of get around things a little bit as well. But just always trying to be solution oriented, trying to find ways to fix problems. Sometimes it's just black and white and you can't do it, but sometimes there are ways to kind of get around things. So just being able to see that, but also get a perspective from the administrative side, which helps you on the coaching side now, just kind of understanding how an athletic department works, kind of what goes into that, just all the different people that are working behind the scenes to make sure each team has what they need to be able to compete.
So with your background in compliance, when you come back into college baseball, because I'm sure we'll get into, your the last several years you've been a scout full time for the Rays, but when you get back in and you see there's a transfer portal, there's the NIL, there's a lot more, there's a lot different, I would say, compliance rules, it seems like now, than there was before. Like, what was your initial take on it? Was it like, I get it based upon, what I've seen in the past, or like, what did you initially think?
I thought it was a little bit easier. Like if I was working in this compliance world, I think it'd be a little bit easier than it was back then. even though it's more stuff with the portal and the NIL and all that stuff, but it just kind of opens things up, right? You didn't have to worry about so many waivers and things like that like you did in the past. So this just kind of opens it up. So I always thought it was, need to do something in terms of the rules just to allow guys to be able to, move around a little bit more freely. Maybe we went too far with that, but like I still, at the end of the day, I think it was a good move to kind of open it up a little bit and allow the guys to be able to start making a little bit of money, but also being able to transfer if the situation needed.
Do you have guys who maybe you've started recruiting or maybe who are coming back or whatever who are initially were like, "Hey, like, can I get some money? Like, do we have any NIL money?"
But yeah, it's al they always ask, right? That's always a question, but, we don't have much here right now, we're building towards that. We do have opportunities to do that in the future, but right now, I just wanted guys who wanted to be here and just kinda bought into what we're trying to build. I mean, luckily, all the guys that asked those questions, they still end up coming even though we didn't have it because they just believed in what we're trying to do here.
What are you guys trying to do here?
So just trying to build a nationally, recognized program, right? Of course, that starts first just trying to be, good within our own conference. But at the end of the day, we want more than that. We feel like it's a place where we can win at. It's in a great area of Virginia in the 757 area, which historically has produced a lot of good baseball players. But then also within the region, getting down into North Carolina, up into Maryland, and places like that. We've had success here in the past. We've had big leaguers play here, a big league hitting coach that graduated from Norfolk State, and just the momentum that the department is growing, just with with Michael Vick coming on board, and then the success of our basketball teams and our track and field programs and other teams on campus. It's a lot of momentum building here. And I just feel like we have a chance to do something special within our, you know, learn our niche and kind of work within that.
I'm sure you have like, before you took the job, I'm sure you had a vision for the program, kinda what you just outlined right there, and then I'm sure there's also an element of, like, you had some different ideas on how you're gonna go about, like, accomplishing that vision, and obviously that's gonna take time, but what are some of the basic foundational, like, just bricks that you feel like, you're putting down this year that you feel like once they're down, like, you're gonna be able to build on top of that year after year after year?
Yeah, no doubt, man. First and foremost, just kind of learn this with the Rays, man. It starts with people and processes, right? So just trying to get the right people on board and start to put processes in place that can kind of lead to success, short term and long term. So that's kind of the foundational piece. But then from a baseball standpoint, we want to be a team that's really aggressive on, offensively, and dynamic and being able to score in a multitude of ways, right? So whether we're facing a really good Friday night guy, we need to bunt, move runners and do that sort of thing, steal bases, be able to win that type of game, but then also being able to win the 10-9 midweek game as well, right? So just trying to be multifaceted on offense. And then on defense, just trying to be as efficient as possible on the mound, throw a ton of strikes, and take care of the baseball. Because I really feel like in most, avenues of amateur baseball, more games are lost than they are won. And what I mean by that is as long as you just kind of give yourself a chance, take care of the baseball, don't beat yourself, limit free bases, you'll have a chance in the back third of games to win. So that's kind of the baseball side of it. So, again, throw a ton of strikes on the mound, be as efficient as possible, get the ball in play as much as possible. Defensively, take care of the baseball, limit the free bases, and then offensively, be as multifaceted as possible.
You mentioned, it's about people and process. So how do you go about finding those people?
Yeah, so it takes time, right? First it starts to getting to know people, right? Like from outside of baseball, just kind of what makes people tick, family life, all that stuff is important. Just trying to see, you know, do they make sense for what we're trying to do, both from a player standpoint, but also from a coaching staff standpoint as well. That's important to just kind of see, how guys, maneuver, what makes them go, and those sorts of things. So it's a process, right? It's just first and foremost, it takes time, trying to get to know them and the way the recruiting world works now, sometimes that may lead us to being passed up by some guys because we're taking too much time. But at the end of the day, I feel like it's more important to take the extra time. And if we miss out on a guy or two, that's fine. I can live with that as long as we're still getting the right people at the end of the day. So that's how you do that. And then processes is kind of one of those things where you come into Norfolk State and at first you kind of evaluate, see how things work here, from an administrative standpoint, all around, and then just kind of start to implement your processes that way because, things that, how I may want to do it at other places may not particularly fit here. So always trying to be open-minded to seeing how things work.
What would be an example of that? Because you've coached at obviously at other schools too. Like, what's an example of like maybe it's different there than it might be at another school?
Yeah, so first and foremost, just kind of understanding, where we are. So like just from a geographic standpoint, the type of players that we can get. Also being a historically black college, that some for some people, initially that may turn them away. For some, it may invite them. So just understanding that piece of it and knowing that, you may have to do a little bit more sifting through to kind of find what you want, compared to when I was at, BCU or even Division III Randolph-Macon, where we were able to go to the World Series. Like, it's just a different type of player that you're recruiting. So again, just learning the school, and then also from a major standpoint, what majors are prominent here compared to those other places. So all of that stuff goes into play.
Parents, are you tired of spending money going from showcase to camp, not even knowing if a coach is even looking for your son's position or even knows his name? One of the reasons that I started my college baseball recruiting service is to help guide families throughout the recruiting process so you're not having to waste money and time going from showcase or camp to camp. If you're interested in hearing more about how I can help your son, head to patrickjonesbaseball.com and fill out the form. That's patrickjonesbaseball.com, fill out the form right on the homepage, and I'll be in touch. All right, back to the podcast. Going back to what your dad was saying, or not your dad, but your dad was coaching you, growing up maybe a little bit, and then but you ended up not wanting to. I want to maybe actually this is the question is like why didn't you end up going to play for your dad and then versus going somewhere else?
Yeah, so it was never even a conversation, right, of trying to go play for him. He never asked, it was, I had other places, and also he played at VCU himself, so it was, so that was kind of his alma mater too. So it was cool to kind of go play at VCU, but it was never a question. My brother actually played for him at Virginia State, and now coaches with him at Virginia State, but like it was just never came up. Just funny,
It
funny.
never
It's
came
pretty
up.
never came up. Like, you want to come play for me? It was always like, do your thing. So I had some couple of different offers, and at the end of the day, VCU made the most sense for me. But like Virginia State was never even a question.
That's wild.
Yeah, it is kind of wild.
Man, okay, that's interesting. So after you get done you were playing in college, you said, you're doing the compliance thing for a while and then you get into coaching. Like, when you were in compliance, were you kind of like getting the itch to get back into the game, or like did it just kind of organically unfold without you having to really like force your hand into it?
Yeah, so initially when I got into the compliance side, it was always the goal was to be an athletic director. So, if I would have stayed on that track, I probably could have been an athletic director at some point, but I've missed the game too much and I needed to get back involved in it. And at the time, the pitching coach, who was the guy who was a pitching coach when I was at VCU, became the head coach, Sean Stifler. So Coach Stifler was the head coach then, and I approached him about maybe come back getting my master's degree, but also being the director of ops. He was like, "Sure, we would love to have you." Did that for a year, and then that kind of transitioned into the volunteer there for 3 years, and we were, had some good teams there, won 35 games each year, and went to the super regionals. And I guess that was 2015. We're 2 wins away from Omaha.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What have you learned the most as a coach?
Man, it's about the people. Again, it's about the people, and treating people the right way in relationships is paramount. Like, it's just, you know, everything that I've kind of gotten, the jobs I've gotten have kind of been off of relationships. So, for instance, the scouting job with the Rays, it just so happens that my cross checker with the Rays he recruited me when he was a college coach at VMI. So in high school, I didn't go to VMI, of course, but we had a really good relationship with it, and he ended up being the cross checker, later to kind of help me, get into the Rays. But also with that, just the relationships you build, the people that you meet along the way, you never know when they'll come back into your life at a later date, man. So the baseball world is just so small. So,
So
always treating people the right way.
I just want to clarify, the guy who ended up hiring you to scout for the Rays recruited you when he was at VMI?
Yeah, so it was kind of sort of. So he was the cross checker. So he didn't technically hire me, but he was a part of the process. But the guy who ended up hiring me, Rob Metzler, was our scouting director. But Chuck Ritchie, who's now the scouting director with the Rays, he was the national cross checker at the time, and he was the one who kind of led most of the search. And it just so happened that I didn't apply for the job or anything. I was at Randolph Macon. We were just coming off being, number one in the country a couple of years prior. So we were doing well, recruiting well. I had a lot of responsibility there and really loved it. And then I just got approached in the fall of maybe that was 21, I think it was. And Chuck called me out of the blue and was like, we've heard that you would be a good candidate for our position. I'm like, who told you that? And what happened was his son, Ryan Ritchie, was the pitching coach at George Mason, and I knew Ryan a little bit, but we would see each other on the road, recruiting at times. And I guess he had told his dad, he was like, "Look, this guy's always working. I see him all over the place. He evaluates people pretty well, so maybe you should give him a call." And Ryan didn't mention any of that to me, but his dad ended up calling, and just the more I dug into the Rays, it just made sense for me to do it, even though I always thought of myself as a coach, but just the opportunity to work with a great organization like the Rays just presented itself, and I had to take advantage of it. But again, that was one of those things where you just kind of do your work and go about it the right way, and you never know who's watching.
Yeah, no, I think that's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to emphasize that a little bit because that's perfect, I think, for players and parents to hear. Where it's like, it sounds like you had some, even out of high school, your recruitment, like the guy who's recruiting you at VMI, like
Yeah,
all that stuff where kids don't realize like how they act now, how they treat people now. Like you don't know where those people are going to end up 5 years from now, 7 years from now, and so
exactly.
your reputation matters a ton and how you treat people and even if it's not a place you want to go to or you're interested in, like you treat people the right way, they're going to remember that. And, the old saying is like people don't always necessarily like remember what you tell them, but they do remember how they made you feel.
No
And so
doubt.
I think that's perfect for players and parents out there to hear that. Going a little bit more into the scouting realm, I always think that's interesting. What's that lifestyle like? Like, what's a typical day in season for a scout for your like
Yeah.
when you were a scout? Like, what was a typical day in season like for you?
Yeah, so in the spring, man, it's pretty much, probably 6 days a week you're at a ballpark. Typically, the only day that you may not be is Monday, and it just kind of depends on whatever area you were in. So my area kind of changed over my time with the Rays, but last couple of years I had North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, DC, and a little bit of West Virginia as well. So, every day I'm at within those states at a college game, a high school game, sometimes two games a day. So the way it'll work is, you try to set your schedule up at the beginning of the week and try to map it out of where you need to be. A lot of nights in hotels, but of course, you get to the ballpark early. You see BP, you go through the pregame stuff, you watch the game, and then you get to the hotel, man. You got to write that report. You got to get you look at maybe some more information, maybe through Synergy or some data stuff that you may have through TrackMan or whatever to try to finalize and formulate your opinion on it. And then you got to put it into the system, man. And then you start it over the next day. And, it's just as an area scout, which I was responsible for those states and knowing all of the prospects within those states. So it's a lot of, talking and networking with other scouts from other teams, but also the college coaches, the high school coaches, the travel ball coaches, but just that network and those relationships kind of are paramount in terms of area scouting.
How many miles a week would you say you were driving in the car?
Man, that's a really good question. I mean, easily, over the course of a month, it was, at least 5,000 or more, typically a month, easy.
Easy.
So a lot of a lot of oil changes. A lot of teams, depending on which team you are, you get a company car or you get a stipend and different things. So it just they take care of you with all that stuff, man. But a lot of my, and it's also a lot of time in the car. So a lot of time podcasting, watching your podcast or listening to audiobooks and things like that. So you have a lot of me time as well to be able to, listen to different things and learn. And so it's a really rewarding job. It can be thankless at times, because a lot of people don't understand what goes into it. And scouting is kind of the lifeblood of any organization of kind of player acquisition. So, but I loved it, man. It was a great 4 years with the Rays.
Now that you're not a full-time scout with the Rays, hoping you can kind of give us a little bit of insight into maybe what like if you're a player listening to this, you want to get drafted one day, and maybe it's
Yeah,
one of your guys, right? Maybe it's a college player right now or high school,
yeah.
whatever. Like what are some of the things that players and families don't know that you're evaluating or you're looking for or you're observing or just something that's kind of like overlooked? Like it's obviously if a kid throws 100, like everyone sees that, but like what are some of the things that maybe turned you off on a player or maybe got convinced you were all in on a player or something like that that maybe is overlooked?
Yeah, no doubt, man. It's for first and foremost, it's so hard to get drafted nowadays, right? So that's the first thing that parents and players need to realize, man. It's a lot of things that go into it, and it's a lot of things that you don't control. But the things that you do control, for the makeup piece is huge for any scout, especially the area scout trying to differentiate one guy from another who may have similar talent. Just being able to understand if that guy will be able to endure the challenges and the struggles that come along with being a professional player. So the makeup piece is huge. You try to figure some of that stuff out by talking to, their coaches and things like that. You do get some time with the player themselves as well, trying to learn some of that stuff. But a lot of it is what you see at the ballpark, right? Just how they interact with their teammates in the dugout. Even in pregame, like when team is stretching, like what's his interactions like with everybody else? Do people like being around him? Those sorts of things, like just how, and then we're at games, especially high school games or not as much in college, but you talk to the other people, the concession stand worker at high school games, you talk to other parents, you talk just to kind of see, what their thoughts are on that player. Is he a good kid? Like what's he about? So the makeup piece is never, quite understood as much as it should be. Like that's a big piece of it from a scouting standpoint. Then from there, man, like the physical standpoint, like your body is your billboard. So that tells us a lot about what you think about yourself as a player by how you take care of your body. And we can see that the first thing we see is your body. So that's a big part of it as well. And then from there, it's just kind of knowing what you do well and really leaning into that. Of course, you're always working on your weaknesses, but if you're going to be, if you're, a contact guy, if you got some speed, man, use your speed. Show that part of your game, right? Don't try to be the power guy if that's not what you are. Just understanding what you do well, and go from there. And then from a pitching standpoint, one thing that a lot of organizations are trying to find now is kind of that outlier, a guy who's kind of different than the guy who's everybody's throwing, 92 to 94 now. Like, what about a guy with a little bit maybe lower arm slot or something? His metrics are different, just something that's different about him compared to other people. So that's one thing that I think a lot of teams are starting to try to differentiate into now.
Your body is your billboard. I wanna put that on a t-shirt.
It is,
Did you
man.
come
It
up with
really
that?
is. No, I don't think I can. I forgot where I got it from, but it stuck with me, and it's true. Like that's the first thing we look at. Like and that's the first thing on the scouting report is like describe him physically. Like what's the body like and what that projects, to in the future. Some of the stuff you can't control, like some genetical stuff, but in terms of your strength and just the way your body's put together, you do have a say in that.
Yeah, so if you're right now, yeah, a head coach Norfolk State and you're out watching players, scouting for potential players to come play for your program, and you see a player who is maybe a little bit overweight, I
Yeah.
mean, is that just immediate red flag?
It's a little bit of a red flag. I don't cross him off automatically. You still watch him play. Sometimes can be a little bit deceiving. Maybe he moves better than he looks. So I always want to continue to watch him, but it is like, that's gonna be tough for me. So yeah, that's the first thing you notice because I'm always looking for guys who have some bounce to them, some twitch, some athleticism that can move well. And it doesn't always have to be a long, lean type guy. You can have some strength to you and still move well within your body, move gracefully. So we call what I call baseball athletic. It's just some guys may not run the 60 all that fast or may not be the most athletic in like a basketball sense or, jump high, run far, that sort of thing. But in terms of being able to move gracefully, on the field, then that's something that I look for as well.
What do you look for from a home to first time?
Yeah, I mean, of course, if you can a left-hander, if you're 4-1 or lower, then that's really good. But like, 4-2s or lower, I can work with. That's a big thing. And I think we can always teach guys to, on the bases, to be really good base runners. That's more important. The speed is important, but being able to go first to third, second to home, get dirt ball reads, those are things that I look for more than just a flat time home to first or 60 time and things like that.
Mm, okay, I gotcha. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the 60 time, I mean, that's obviously a big thing. But when it comes to like your guys' camps, like how do you structure the camp? Is it a typical like showcase style camp or
Yeah.
is it inter squad? Like how do you guys do it?
Yeah, so typically the way we do it is kind of like your typical pro case where you run the 60. We do that just because it's easy to compare to everybody. It's just a comparable tool, right? It's not the end all be all, but we get it because we can compare it to other guys. And then from there, you throw for the outfielders throw, infielders throw. Then we do a defensive breakdown where we go to positions and do a defensive instructional phase, and we get a lot from that. Just kind of seeing again instinctually how guys think about the game, how they move, do they know their position? So we get a lot from that defensive instructional phase. And then, in the afternoon, we play games, seeing how guys work within a game setting. And then that's where you get your home the first times. And again, just kind of seeing how guys move around the field. And during our camp games, I like to be out on the field, talking with different players, just kind of, again, just being out in the middle of it, seeing who's communicating, just again, just learning as much as I can. I don't like to be the guy sitting behind, the screen back behind home plate. I need to be out there moving around just to kind of seeing how they're interacting.
What's gonna be your guys' philosophy at Norfolk State when it comes to transfer portal versus high school versus JUCO? Like, is it gonna be a third, a third, a third? Is it gonna be dependent on the year? Like, how do you think you're gonna go about approaching that?
Yeah, I think it will depend a little bit on the year, but eventually, we want to be based off of being a high school based program, right? We want to get the high school player in here, and that be the foundation of what we build, and then just kind of use the portal and the junior college recruiting as kind of supplement, right? I do think junior college guys are kind of getting overlooked a little bit. So initially, we may kind of delve a little bit more into that right now, just trying to find some guys who can come in right away. And we need to balance out our classes a little bit. Our classes aren't as balanced as I would like them to be. So, maybe some JUCO guys, and then the transfers, like I said, it's more like a supplemental thing. Don't want to be transfer you just because some good players out there, but in terms of the culture, and I'm big on the people in the process. Sometimes you can do a lot of research on those guys, but it happens quick within that summer. So you may miss on a guy. You get one bad guy into it, it could turn everything around. I'd rather have that play against that guy and he beats me, in a weekend series than having that guy in my program and he's eating away at us, 365 days a year, right? So I think you can learn a little bit more and get more information from the high school guy, and those guys kind of come in and you kind of develop those guys within and just kind of supplement with the transfers.
Last question I got for you. Why should someone wanna come play at Norfolk State?
First and foremost, man, we're gonna play the game the right way. You're gonna play the game the right way. We're gonna play hard. We're gonna play fast. And we're gonna be really aggressive, right? So all of my offensive players have green lights on the bases. I want my guys to be individuals. I want them to be able to do what they do well. So you're gonna have freedom to be who you are individually, but at the same time, you're gonna learn about the game, right? I've been around the game from a college and pro standpoint, know a lot of people, so the exposure, to the professional if professional baseball is something that you want, you'll be able to, get that from here. Outside of baseball, we're going to take you from being, dependent on the family when you get here to being an independent person when you leave here and being able to go out and do whatever you want from a career standpoint. And then Norfolk State itself, man, it's just a great university. It's thriving right now and the momentum is building. It's a lot of, excitement around campus, really good majors here. We're in the city. We're not far from the beach. It's just a lot of things to like, man. So it's kind of like what we call a sleeping giant, so to speak. We're just trying to build it up and get it going.
Love it. ML, thanks for coming on today.
Of course, Pat, thank you so much.